Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 31 of the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and co-pilot here, and the co-chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Leibowitz. Be sure to catch his show, The Rational Egoist. You do that every day? Do you do that podcast every day?
No, I put out about 2 a week. I used to do 4 a week, but it's just too much. It's to do this, that, and the job. I'm framing Gilder at the moment.
Did you watch the show?
I did watch the show. Yes.
Okay, classic, right?
Yes, I liked it, but it's one of those things where it was so built up that it would have been hard for it to match my expectations. But I enjoyed watching it. It was a good movie.
Okay, now you have to read the book because the book is even better than the movie. So check it out. And written by William Goldman as well, who wrote the screenplay, one of the greatest Hollywood screenwriters of all time. He wrote All the President's Men. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I mean, the guy, he wrote Magic. I don't know if you've ever seen Magic with Anthony Hopkins, but if you have not, Anne Margaret's in it as well, Burgess Meredith.
I haven't.
A classic thriller, like psychological thriller. Check that out.
Is that the one with the ventriloquist dummy?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay.
I didn't know the name of it. I don't know if I actually saw the whole thing, but I've seen it.
Yeah, William Goldman was a great writer, and he really knows how to tell a story. So I thought, that this time around there was going to be some good news in here. I didn't see like a good news flare anywhere, because I felt like we had to leave the audience with a little bit of hope. I'm hoping maybe the capitalist message comes through, and so we sort of know where we're going with each bad story and how better to attack the problems we're going to find in the future with some of this stuff that's going on. But I was hoping for just a flat out good story, like maybe a dog thing.
Oh, I thought we were going to, I didn't know you wanted me to send you a good story. I thought we were just going to give them good news at the end of some sort.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's what you thought? Okay. So we'll just give them good news at the end.
All right.
I don't know that it'll be necessarily news relating to actual news, but maybe it'll just be personal news. Something to give people a little positive vibe to end the day on. I mean, it's Tuesday. We're starting to get towards the middle of the week. I think people need a little something to sustain their energy for the rest of the week. So, I mean, where to begin here, almost. Why don't we talk about Biden first?
Go right ahead. Works for me.
Because Biden's been running around certain outlets lately with his wife, Jill, attempting to reinvigorate his, save his legacy, not just reinvigorate his reputation. I don't know that he really had a very good reputation through his political life, but he's certainly trying to save his legacy in the face of books that are going to be coming out shortly about how incompetent and physically incapable he was of actually handling the job of the presidency. And so Axios has come out with some more dire news for the Bidens, which amounts to basically this, that the people around Biden, his handlers, feared his physical condition to such a degree that they thought if he actually ran and succeeded in defeating Trump for a second term, they might have to put him in a wheelchair. Now, there's various claims as to why that was. His doctor says, I think, that there were he had pretty serious spinal issues, and that his gait was his shuffling gait wasn't so much a mental deficiency as it was he had terrible arthritis in his back, and he also had a couple broken bones in his feet that he failed to acknowledge. And so, but they were trying to avoid this contingency at all costs because they, of course, have to present a facade of vigorousness with respect to the president. Now, this isn't like the first time this has ever happened. And it's not the first time it's happened with Democratic presidents. This seems to be a habit with Democratic presidents. After Wilson experienced his second stroke and was completely incapacitated, basically his wife ran the White House. President Roosevelt was never seen in a wheelchair, never publicly seen in a wheelchair. So the fact that he had polio in the early 20s and then was paralyzed by it was almost never really. I mean, it was something that Americans knew. It was news, but it was something they were never directly confronted with by seeing him in a wheelchair. And when he would stand behind a podium, he had iron leg supports to help him stand upright. So there was never a confrontation directly with his issues. And then, of course, there was the great President Kennedy, who was filmed through his father for Time Life magazine, and presented a facade of vigor and strength and youth when he really had Addison's disease and a back that was so severely damaged from, I guess, injuries received in World War II that he had to wear a back brace. And it's part of the reason he couldn't fall forward when he was shot through the throat, because he had this back brace on that kept him upright so that the other bullets, Oswald's bullets, could hit him. So the press has seemed to shelter Democratic presidents from their incapacities or their weaknesses. I don't think they have shown the same proclivity towards Republican presidents. But what do you think about this massive cover-up on the part of media to pretend like President Biden was competent at doing his job, was mentally there and physically capable?
Well, first, I can hear the screams of Democrats crying out from the wilderness. Here, yes, I was just gonna Alan Thomas chimed right in and said Nancy Reagan, because of course the Democrats claim that Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's was already a factor while he was in office, and it was hid from the public. So, and Reagan was I think the best president of my lifetime, but by far. But nevertheless, there are those claims. But this is I think it's grotesque, Mark, on so many levels and from so many perspectives. From the perspective of Joe Biden, who insisted that he run when clearly he was not capable of doing so, but his hubris, it got the best of him. He thought he could do it, he could pull it off. He was the guy to beat Trump. His wife, that had to have known, but let him go forward. I think it's gross.
I think since she was involved in every cabinet meeting, she was the real
mover. It could be. And then you have, of course, the people around him that hit it. I think that's gross. The media that, didn't focus on it and pretended it was all bunk when people would complain about it. But I'll also say this. There's another side to this, and I've talked about it here before, I believe, and that's the people that were doing the most crying out about how bad Biden was. Forgive me for not taking them seriously. Forgive me for not taking seriously the people who defend every single move that Donald Trump makes, right? When that's your reputation, when that's what you've shown, I have a hard time taking you seriously. And I don't watch much TV, so I'm not seeing Biden, how he's acting, especially, I was incarcerated for half of his term. But I heard a lot of right-wing radio, right-wing personalities saying it. But again, these are the people who say January 6th was an inside job. Either it was the FBI or it was all fake news anyways. Trump never did anything wrong. It was a perfect phone call, the whole nine. I mean, we could probably spend a few shows going over all the things that they've defended him on. And it speaks to me to a broader problem that is of the utmost importance to me, and that is our information ecosystems, because they're so broken in this country. Douglas Murray went on Joe Rogan to take on Dave Smith and Rogan about their role in the podcast sphere or influencer sphere of putting out bad info. But the media does it as well. The government's experts do it as well. And it's hard to know where to turn. And just to, illustrate the problem, the other day I was listening to a local talk radio show, and I'm friends with the host. I mean, he's a nice enough guy, but on one hand, he was talking about how the government just lies and lies and lies. We cannot trust the government. Then he turns around and he says that Garcia, the guy who was deported wrongfully to El Salvador, he says this guy is a gangbanger and a wife beater. And I'm thinking, okay, what is your source for that information? It's the same government that you just spent the last 15 minutes telling me I couldn't trust, right? But the audience The cognitive dissonance. On one hand, they're like, yeah, government lies. Then they turn right back around. Yeah, gangbanger. Yeah, get him out.
Well, it lies when it's not their government. When their guys, when their tribe have the levers of power, then suddenly government gets a reality check.
Yes, and it's a sorry state of affairs. But in the final analysis, there were people that covered up for Biden, and though in Biden, of course, in on it, and the bulk of the blame has to go there. I just can't stomach when the Trumpsters come out and talk about, oh, we told you. You've told me a lot of things, so let's just dial that back. So Thomas Pentelow, my good friend, boss, and former youth officer in my town who used to chase my friends and me around, he says great president JFK. Really, I don't know, Tom, if you're saying that JFK it was a great president, or if you're questioning, if you're saying that we implied he was a great president.
Yeah, because I don't think he was a great president.
Neither do I.
I was using the term sarcastically because so many people idolize him, and even the right has used him as an example of proper conservative politics. And since the left idolizes pretty much every president they have, I was sort of being sarcastic. I don't know if it came off in my tone, but no, he's not. He wasn't a great president.
And by the way, now that I know my boss is here, I'm going to have to do less talking about how I'm so busy and I have so much to do, lest he stop giving me stuff to do, because I need the stuff to do.
Oh, good, Thomas. Keep him working, because working is good. So Bonnie Bertrand says something in the chats. Aren't we pretending Trump is capable? Now, that's an interesting comment, because on the one hand, that Fox News certainly is pretending that he's capable and that he's some kind of negotiating genius, and that he's playing four-dimensional chess. But I hasten to wonder what the other networks are saying. I don't think anybody who watches MSNBC or The View or CBS or ABC News or CNN for that matter, or NPR, I don't think they're going to get the same impression that Trump is a really capable cat who's on top of his game. I think they're going to get somewhat the opposite perspective. Now, granted, Fox is the biggest, I think, cable news network there is, and it certainly has a wider audience of folks. And they can certainly twist messages to appeal to those audiences. But then you have the rest of the media, and that includes 89% of the print media that skew left and Democratic, that are after Trump's ass and they can't wait for the other shoe to fall. So,
and Mark, and here we have the other side of this equation, right? Where you have the left who just everything Trump does is horrible. He's Hitler, whatever. And they say he's not capable, but then you have the right who will never listen to them. They just do what the left did for Biden. They just defend. And as Alan Thomas said, nobody seems to be concerned with individual rights or liberty. So that's why we're important. That's why the American Capitalist Party is important, because we're here to make the arguments. We're here to tell the truth to the best of our ability. If we get it wrong, which I'm sure we will, then we just say, hey, we got it wrong. It happens. We don't double down. We're not going to keep defending BS. We're not tribalists. We are actually people concerned with facts, logic, truth, and we're here to promote them. So where can they find the American Capitalist Party, Mark, anyway?
It's funny that you say that, because they could find them at AmericanCapitalistParty.org. You can go there, you can hit donate, you can become a member, and you can be the change, folks. Yes, we're not a party devoted to partisanship. What you see with the left and the right, with the Republicans and the Democrats, are people circling the wagons around their tribe and doing everything in their power to pretend their tribe, one, knows everything, and two, when in error, has in fact made no errors. The American Capitalist Party does not go for that. Our ultimate end is, of course, the defense and protection of individual rights, and enshrining those in such a way as to make it nearly impossible for the government to violate them. But when we are wrong, we know that we are better for acknowledging that we are wrong, not for evading reality, but for confronting reality directly. Now, speaking of confronting reality, I want to confront Alan / Alex here. our esteemed treasurer. He does say Nancy Reagan. Now, I lived through the Reagan presidency. Alex, I don't know how old you are and how much of that presidency you remember, but literally this was like the first presidential election I could vote in was Reagan. Of course, I did not vote for Reagan at the time. I was a registered Democrat.
Oh, no.
I thought the world was coming to an end, of course. Well, I was fresh out of high school, man. I was a leftist. What can you say? And the left does a very good job at propagandizing and getting you worked up about certain issues that the government has really no place in fixing. Really, we do. But I never remembered seeing a precipitous decline in Ronald Reagan's public appearances. I never remember him being off his game in debates. I don't remember him being off his game when he gave a speech. I never remembered seeing the Mitch McConnell faraway stare, the freeze in the face, or Biden's confusion. I never saw anything remotely similar to that. There was a video that circulated for a time where Reagan was taking questions from afar. He was on his ranch. People were shouting questions at him. He couldn't hear a question, so he sort of whispered to Nancy, "What was that?" She said, "Just say yes." He said yes out loud, and it made him look sort of like a puppet of Nancy Reagan. But then again, it could have been that he just now I'm not making excuses for Reagan. I'm not a Reagan fan. I think he's one of the better presidents of modern history, but of course he did really nothing that he said he was going to set out to do, and grew the deficit and made us worse off in many respects. But he could articulate the American dream very well. And I think he articulated it unapologetically in ways that we just don't see anymore. And certainly Trump can't do it. Nobody did it better than Reagan in this century. But I think he just trusted his wife, and his wife, she was his companion of his entire life. And when she said, "Just say yes," he went along with it. And so what you saw was a strong partnership for a guy who couldn't hear what the questioner was asking. Now, that wouldn't have been my way of doing things. I don't know that I would have necessarily trusted my wife if she said, "Say yes." I think I would have said, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Just because that's just the way I am. I want to confirm things on my own.
Breaking news. Mark Pellegrino does not trust his wife. We do not need somebody will put that in a clip.
I trust my own mind, not my wife, but I wouldn't necessarily in that situation. If anything, because of the optics, right? If anything, because of the optics. Because look, that little piece has been around to haunt Reagan's legacy since it was filmed. So, you want to make sure you're on top of the game. When my wife says, "Say yes," I just say yes. Well, James, happy wife, happy life. Now we know why you always have a smile on your face. Anyway, so I think have we exhausted old Biden? I think he's really trying to he's trying to rebuild his legacy. I think he really thinks it's in jeopardy right now. And sort of Lady Macbeth-esque, I mean, Jill is in on this too. I mean, she interrupted him during the View interviews. I mean, when he started to stumble and falter and lose track of where he was, she picked up the ball. And you could tell that's sort of the way it probably was for the last 4 years, and probably why she was at cabinet meetings. I mean, I don't think it's a usual phenomenon for the first lady to be sitting in on high-level cabinet meetings. Do you know anything about that, Michael?
I don't, but I will say this: that even when he was younger, I should say, he was still a jerk. I mean, I'll never forget his debate with Paul Ryan, where he was such a dick. It was unbelievable.
Is that where he laughed half the time?
Yeah, he kept like being interruptive. It was because Obama had lost the first debate to Romney and lost badly. So Biden had to make up for it. And instead of actually bringing an intellectual argument, which he evidently was incapable of doing, he just was a jerk. And, that was that. He also, remember when during the primary, he talked about how people like Obama, of course, he's a black guy, he's clean, so there was that.
He revealed his inner racism so many times even during his Senate tenure. I mean, this guy was a dyed-in-the-wool racist. If you don't vote for me, you're not black.
Yeah.
He actually had the audacity to say that. And, you know, if a Republican had made a comment like that, you got to know it would be plastered across the pages of every newspaper in the United States. It would be trumpeted from the hills. They would drive the man out of town on a rail. They would tar and feather him and drive him out of town on a rail. His political career would be ruined. But when Biden said it, it just sort of disappeared into the ether.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get any more racist than that. Yeah, Biden has always been an awful racist person. Yeah, absolutely. And he's lived on political patronage. He's gotten rich from political patronage. He's a total. I think a Rand. You'd see him in Atlas Shrugged. He's the Orrin Boyle. To me, he's the Orrin Boyle type, right?
No, Orrin Boyle was actually a businessman. I mean, you know, he was paying off the government and all that stuff. Biden would be. Who would he be? Maybe a Wesley Mooch? I don't know. Someone along those lines.
Maybe a Wesley Mooch. Mooch was a regulator?
He was, I think a lobbyist. He was like an advocate. He would be the guy on the inside for people. He'd get paid. I don't know who the
rough and tumble dude in a way. I feel like Biden tries to protect that image.
Well, he does do that. Yeah. He's he's the scrappy kid from Scranton. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what their job is. They have the same personality type.
They do. All right. We got more. We got more for you, people.
Yeah. Are people getting bored with this? Is that what you're saying? Are they not hitting the like button because they're tired of listening?
I don't know, but I'm going to check. That's a good point, Mark. I'm going to go look and see.
I think we all agree, folks. Even the left agrees that it's time for Biden to go out to pasture. It's time for him to just take his retirement, rest, sit on the beach in Delaware, and just, drink sodas and eat vanilla ice cream for the rest of his days, and content himself with the fact that he can't control his legacy. This is just going to be up for history. So the Epoch Times has been reporting Republicans released sweeping tax plan, a key component of Trump's agenda. Now, what do you think is in this tax plan, Michael?
Well, he's got some tax cuts. He's going to extend the tax cuts he put in last time. There's the tips, the tips. What else was there? They didn't exempt the Social Security from taxation. They're going to cut, 10, I forgot how much, $4 trillion or whatever it is, 10 trillion over 10 years or so. Not 10 trillion. I think it was 1.5 trillion. I'm not exactly sure, but over a 10-year span. Basically, they're going to grow the debt is what ultimately is going to happen.
Yeah, it's something like $4 trillion in tax cuts and $1.5 trillion.
1.5, that was it.
In cutting government growth over a 10-year period of time, which sets me deficit spending. So it's not like these people who were put in office in part to deal with our runaway deficit are actually doing anything about it. They don't have the political will to do anything about it, folks. Because if they did, they would be taking care of entitlements, and they would start cutting those by a minimum of 10 to 15% right off the bat. And over, I would say, a 10-year span, in order to give people time for the private market to come up and start to reinvigorate charity again as a means for people to who can't sustain themselves on their own to sustain themselves, or to build up family relations and connections again to help them in these issues. There is absolutely no move to change the welfare state dynamic. No move to change it, no move to shrink it. And they're spending more money on infrastructure because of the FAA's attempt now to rebuild the entire network of air traffic control, which personally should be a private matter. And if it were a private matter, all of those airports would be up to date as we speak, and there would be no worries about the technology. I mean, how can we continue living in this way?
We can't. But the thing is that people will say, well, you should be pro tax cuts. I am. First of all, the idea that cutting the top tax rate to 37% is some type of, great tax cut. I believe they were 39.6 when Trump came into office on the top rate. So cutting it to 37, I mean, that's, whatever. That's not exactly huge. I would like to see it go away. But it's hard for me to take seriously the idea that this is a huge tax cut. I mean, I understand that's what the left has been projecting for years. You cut taxes at all, and it's this huge giveaway for the rich. But you're talking about dropping, very slightly in terms of percentage points. And I like the tax cuts, but you can't just cut taxes without significantly cutting spending. They said that they're going to cut taxes, I think, by $4 trillion, and they're going to cut spending by 1.5 trillion. So there's a 2.5 add to the deficit if you're doing a static rating. I understand that it's not static, but we don't know what the future holds in terms of growth. And if you tie in the tariffs that are on the goods, and you tie in the uncertainty that comes because they keep switching, and the price controls that are going to be on the medications, and the constant jawboning the Fed, I don't see a good outlook for the economy. And I do see the deficit just growing and growing and growing, the debt growing and growing and growing, I should say.
Yeah, and the government under Trump having no incentive to cut this deficit, but every incentive to try to manipulate the Fed, to stoke demand, to try to make it look like we're in a boom period, which inevitably leads, as we all know, anybody who knows what the business cycle is, leads to a bust, because the boom period is the government putting out easy money and easy credit, and therefore sending the wrong signals to entrepreneurs respecting investment and what projects to take up. And those wrong signals end up becoming disastrous business ventures that eventually have to go under. There's overproduction in some areas, underproduction in other areas, because they don't have a proper pricing mechanism and to judge where to put capital resources. So this becomes a disaster upon a disaster upon a disaster. And cutting taxes, as great as it seems, folks, is not going to get us out of the deficit, because unless it's along with a concurrent level of cutting spending, then we're not going to go anywhere but down. So you may receive a temporary relief to your paycheck. You may have a temporary boom of extra cash in your pocket to spend out there in the world, which you're going to have to do because your present dollar will be worth less tomorrow. But you will certainly not be in better shape, or at least we can say your children will be in worse shape if this deficit continues to go out of control. Now, of course, the ideal of the Capitalist Party is to bring involuntary taxation to zero, corporate taxes to zero, tariffs to zero, full and free trade between people. Of course, we would become the enemies of cartelized labor gangs, otherwise known as unions. We would become the enemies of all these various interest groups that have been sucking at the trough of government for decades upon decades and decades. And even a large proportion of the citizenry now, somewhere around 50 to 51% of the citizens of America are in some way dependent upon government largesse. And that means that they either work for the government or they are receiving some form of subsidization or other by the government. Now, all of this would be a very difficult metastasized tumor to remove, but it has to be removed if we want to live as a republic. I cannot stress that enough. $37 trillion is an abstraction to most people, but it's an abstraction that's going to make itself felt within the next decade if we aren't careful. And if you have kids and you want them to live a prosperous life, as it is now, each of us, each and every individual in the United States, is under the burden of somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 of debt thanks to the government. That means $400,000 of wealth and capital is siphoned off of us that could be used for productive endeavors, is now just paying off the debt. And that is terrible, folks. That is a nightmare, and people have to do something about this parasitic government as soon as possible. Now, we have the House, we have the Senate, apparently, the Republicans have the presidency, and the only thing they've been able to pass, Michael, is the Gulf of America resolution.
Yeah, the Gulf. We got a situation going on here with the commies. I told Noah, that I would debate him if I control the mic, because we have experience already with what happens when he controls the mic.
Yes.
So just now I get this thing. He says he's going to debate me about Mises and Marxism in his space after I told him, no, I won't do that. So now, of course, he can go forward and say, look, he won't. What a freaking joke.
Yeah, these guys are afraid to go off the home turf because they know they can stack the deck with the home turf. They know they can get their little fangirls from the audience to butt in and pontificate and attack, and they know they'll get their Hazaldin, whatever his real name is, Mahmoud or something like that, to come in and sneer and effectively distract the conversation from what it really needs to be engaged in. Look, here's the deal, Michael. When you were on with him the first time, you were beating him so badly he had to call in Hazaldin as a save. And to yes. completely derail the whole conversation. Otherwise, he would have, looked like the idiot that he is. And he doesn't want to. When you control the mic, he can't go off and pontificate. He can't lie yes. and carry on or change the narrative or any of that. They don't like that. And
I'm going to message him in his little thing right now to let him know and let all his people know what a lying jerk he is. I'm not going to put it quite that way, but you get my drift.
Just so his people, that's what they do. So they don't care that you call them a liar. That's what they do. They think they're actually being clever. They think they're being insightful. They think that they're being shrewd, and that if you want to be in the public space, you have to lie and manipulate. You have to use people as tools in order to get what you want. That's not called dishonesty. Disingenuousness. That's just called cleverness. That's just called being practical. And that's the way these people look at principles like integrity and honesty. They don't hold them to be very dear principles.
No, they do not. Not. Thank you, by the way, for getting me involved with these people.
You're welcome. I'm glad. Look, I'm glad. Here's what I think, though, guys. I mean, the American Communist Party is doing pretty much what Hamas did in the Gaza Strip. Hamas initially presented itself as a humanitarian organization that wanted to deal with the corruption of the Palestinian Authority. And there was a great deal of corruption in the Palestinian Authority. How can you be, an offshoot of the PLO and not be totally and utterly corrupt? And so for a number of years, they built up a reputation within the community as being a religious-centered, moral center for the Gazan community. They engaged in humanitarian help, and then they got political power and became something else. This is precisely what the American Communist Party is doing in certain states. They're getting together and they're planting trees, and then they advertise the fact that they're planting trees, and then they're getting together and giving people turkeys on Thanksgiving, and then they're advertising that fact on social media to talk about what a benevolent party they are. Well, that's just the means to an end, folks, and the end isn't pretty. It's never pretty with communists. And all you have to do is watch Hazaldin and listen to his diatribes on what their true intentions are, and you can see exactly what's in store for you if you accept that turkey, or if you think that the planting the tree is just the expression of a benevolent party's intent with respect to its community. They're not community-minded, folks. They're not community-minded. They're an inherently violent organization. And that's why they don't want police officers in their midst. They said this. There was just recently a video with Hazaldin explaining why they don't accept police officers in their party. And it's not even like it's because they're a part of the establishment. It's because they're a criminal organization and they want to compete. They want to be a competing force organization. So they don't want the cops to know this. And I said that on Twitter. Look, you guys want to be a competing force institution, and you just don't want the cops to know it because they'll stop you. Well, anyway, folks, if you have half a brain, you won't fall victim to their proselytizing and their bullshit. And everybody here is, I think, fully brained. So we don't have to worry about anybody here falling victim to the American Communist Party. Unless there's a commie in our midst right now listening.
There might be. Uh-oh. I got a problem.
What's that?
Am I better now? No.
Oh, what happened?
So I tried to add myself to the mix here. I gotta.
Well, I think Michael has to go offline for a second to put himself back online. Alex, you say a government doesn't like competition. That's true. It doesn't like competition, but with respect to force organizations, there can't be competing force organizations in the same geographic area. That's called war. So that's why objectivists are for a monopoly of government as opposed to competing force agencies, because
Am I okay now? Still not.
what I hear you perfectly.
Yeah, but I'm getting a wicked echo.
Oh, I don't hear an echo.
Well, I suppose I can just try to do it. It's going to be a little aggravating for me, but nonetheless.
Does anybody else hear an echo? If you do, let us know, because I don't.
Yes, please.
So Senator Ron Johnson says that.
All right.
Can you hear me?
I can. It says no echo in the audience, so that works.
Yeah, it's probably on your headphones.
Yeah.
You probably have an issue with your headphones, and I'm sorry you're going to have to hear things twice. That can be really distracting. You might have to take off your headphones, but then that might create an echo, because then your microphone is picking up sound, and then we might actually hear that. But Senator Ron Johnson, who was proud to serve Wisconsin in the United States Senate, he tweeted out something recently, a Wall Street Journal opinion. Ron Johnson, the ugly truth about the big, beautiful bill. Years after COVID, the overspending continues, even with a Republican in Congress. So what Johnson says about this himself in the tweet is, at bare minimum, the one big, beautiful bill shouldn't increase the annual deficits. With the meager spending reductions being discussed, I'm afraid it actually will. Well, that fear is founded. That fear is founded, because they certainly aren't cutting enough. $1.5 trillion over the course of 10 years is peanuts in comparison to the yearly budgets these governments are putting out. It's really, really nothing. So
I fixed it.
Okay, good. So I don't see how these folks can actually look at the American people with a straight face and claim that they are going to shrink deficits, which was one of the mandates the American people gave President Trump. So what do you think about this? This is a big one. This is probably as big, if not bigger, than the border closure, which is the only thing people seem to like Trump for. Go ahead. You talk, because I have to rescue my dog.
Okay. Tell me quickly, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? I've been all technically screwed up here for a minute. Somebody in the chat, tell me the question. I don't even know it. My computer was all screwed up. Mark.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Hold on. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, folks.
Look, Senator Ron Johnson has said that the bare minimum, the one big beautiful bill, is it shouldn't increase annual deficits.
Oh, okay.
Spending reductions being discussed, I'm afraid it actually will. Now, what person in their right mind could convince themselves that this big beautiful bill is actually reducing deficits? I can't think of anyone with a brain who would actually believe that it's reducing deficits.
Well, I'll tell you what, given that Ron Johnson is a perennial Trump ass kisser and he's criticizing the bill, and there's other Republicans, Chip Roy is all over social media critiquing the bill, I tend to think, and going by the math, which says they're going to cut 1.5 trillion, but cut taxes by 4 trillion. Yes, it's going to explode the debt. And, you know, Trump will be out of office by then, and he's not going to care, but we will be bearing the brunt of his bad policies.
Indeed. Now, Alan Thomas says there was no mandate. Alan, it's sort of what they say. So I'm using their own language.
Yes.
To interpret this. This isn't my language. I don't think Trump has a mandate, to be honest with you, to do 99.9% of the things that he's doing. But they claim the fact that he won the election is a mandate, as every presidential candidate does. They all claim that it's a mandate for them to impose their will on the American people. And one part of that will of the American people was to see the deficit taken care of, to see prices drop, none of which the president is really doing.
No, and will not do. And I agree with you. I mean, we don't think he had a mandate, right? He didn't even get 50% of the vote. But the constant talking points coming out of the White House and the magosphere is that he's got a mandate to carry on his agenda. Part of that agenda was supposed to be cutting the deficit. Last time around, he actually said he was going to pay down the debt. He said he would get rid of the debt, which of course was nonsensical, but nevertheless, he said it.
Yeah, let's be clear. The debt has not been retired by an American president since Andrew Jackson, and that was in the mid 19th century. Since then, we've been deficit spending like mad. I don't think we've recovered from the Civil War. But look, it took us up until Reagan to get to $1 trillion, and in the short span of my lifetime, that debt has ballooned from 1 trillion to 37 trillion, and it's just going to go exponentially faster, because these folks seem to be incentivized to spend more, not less. And let's face it, the American people and the culture at home is allowing this to happen. When you think that you have an entitlement to other people's stuff, or that the society owes you a living or support because of your condition, then you are part of the problem. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't receive support, or that capitalists are against you receiving support. We're just against you holding the gun to the heads of other people and claiming through a third party that you deserve what they have earned. We don't think this is moral or just or good. And speaking of holding a gun to people's heads,
well, hold on one second, because Ian Gilmore says, didn't Clinton have some surpluses? Yes, Ian, he did have some surpluses. But what Mark said is nobody retired the debt. Clinton did not retire the debt. He had some surpluses. The deficit and debt are not the same thing. The debt is accumulated deficits, you know, over time. The deficit has to do with spending bills that they put out, you know, today or whenever. So yes, Clinton did have a budget surplus, but he did not extinguish the debt.
Exactly. And he did that. He only did that because he was a fairly acute politician who understood that Newt Gingrich had him by the testicles, and he went along with what the Republican Congress, who at the time seemed to have a little bit more principle to it than they do today, and they were able to rein in everything that he wanted to do, and actually place him on the path of being one of the more fiscally responsible presidents of the 20th century, which is insane but true.
I've got a NOAA update, Mark. I've got a NOAA update.
Tell me, no update in a minute. I'm trying to get what Alan Thomas is getting at. I feel like he's busting my balls for some reason.
Well, he got to come with a correct name first. But
yeah, okay, hey,
so,
right.
All right. So
evidence against Reagan being a good president. I never said he was a good president. In fact, I said he articulated the American perspective better than most presidents have in the 20th century.
I said he was the best president in my lifetime. I stand by it.
And I don't think he was, simply because he didn't accomplish any of the things he said he was going to do, and he increased the deficit on top of that. But he did articulate the American dream better than any president in the 20th century.
He did give us the biggest tax cut in American history, and he did help defeat the Soviet Union. I mean, he did something.
Yeah, we defeated them by outspending them and being able to incur more debt than them better than they were able to incur it. So
that's true. I'm not saying it was perfect. I mean, the pool of comparisons isn't exactly great here. But in my lifetime, the presidents have been Carter, Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, Obama, and Trump and Biden. So I'm going on there. I'm going, yeah, even Robert Nasir seems to be on my side. And once Robert Nasir says so, that's it. So the NOAA update is this. While we were first, what happened was I tried to send him the link to get onto this show. To do that, I clicked off of here, but then I couldn't get back in, so I had to re-enter. But they didn't let me just re-enter. I had to upload the whole thing again, so I was double on, which is why I was getting the echo. Anyways, I managed to send him a link, and I said, "This is where I said I would debate you, not on your space," and you know that. So he sent me a text back, because I put it right in the space so everybody knew. You know what I mean? What a fraud he is. So he says, you should delete this link. Otherwise, you're going to get a rando in your broadcast. I said, let them. If they come in, we'll put them on and debate them. Who cares?
I love it. Yes, I mean, look, Reagan's a complicated figure to me. Yes, in many respects, he was a great president. He was called the great communicator for a reason, and he was an enemy of the growth of the state, which is for my money is a pretty decent deal. He articulated the American dream unashamedly, unlike presidents today that are steeped in postmodernism and colonialism and imperialism, conflation with capitalism, who cannot articulate an American dream anymore, beyond the jingoistic slogans that Trump kind of comes up with. So he was much more intellectual than a guy like Trump, and understood his philosophy better than anyone. But I don't know how much of it he was able to implement. It certainly made America feel better with respect to its overall self-esteem in the world, and he projected strength and dignity. All of those things are so good. I wish we had something like that today. But he did not accomplish anything that he wanted to in office, as far as I know.
Well, like I said, he did achieve the tax cuts. He helped curb inflation. He is just a president. I mean, he can't just do whatever he wants. He had I believe, a Democratic House and maybe even a Democratic Senate for a while that he had to work with. They did spend an awful lot of money, and the revenues actually went up during Reagan's presidency, not down. Just the spending increased. Not great. I'm not a fan of deficits, of course. They're minuscule compared to what we have now, but he did some things. Again, he's not a Ayn Rand hero, but in my lifetime, who was better?
True. And Mr. Thomas is saying again, in my lifetime is also the first generation statement of being off the gold standard. Yes, we can thank Nixon for that, or another Republican. Well, look, so now there comes out that there's these wealthy universities in Washington, D.C. that are receiving massive, massive subsidies off the taxpayers' back. And it's essentially middle-class workers and high school graduates that never went to college but who are quite productive in their own lives are being taxed to subsidize these universities like George Washington University that has an endowment. What do you think is a rational endowment for a university?
None. Well, wait, hold on.
Well, so provided it's not,
let's
just say not by the state, but this endowment, I'm assuming is state subsidized endowment.
Okay, if it's state subsidized, then just get rid of the state subsidies. There should be no state subsidized endowments for universities. That's the very, very first thing.
Right, and this is becoming a thing now because we've discovered that Harvard University, which has been fomenting anti-Semitism on its campus along with Columbia University, receives hundreds of millions of dollars in federal subsidies for research grants and stuff. And the Trump administration has been trying to withhold these funds simply because they don't like the fact that these places are hubs for anti-Semitic activity. It's not that they understand that universities should be private and that no taxpayer should be tapped to subsidize any given thing in any university. It's just simply to get them to go along with what they want. Well, George Washington University's endowment is $2.5 billion. And Georgetown University's endowment is $3.6 billion. And that's bigger than the GDPs of whole country.
Yeah, but I don't think they're talking about state endowments there, because that guy there, his thing is the article, that author in the article written in the National Review, he wants to get rid of giving them tax breaks.
Yes,
they're not being given money. They're just not having to pay money into the system. And he thinks they should have to be, because they're not teaching what he thinks they should be teaching. And that's I'm all for get rid of taxes on everybody. Like, he wants to raise taxes on those universities because those universities aren't ideologically up to his standards.
No, I agree with that. I agree that George Washington University and Georgetown University shouldn't have all of that land and have zero of it taxed. That's not the way the the American worker, you and I, have to deal with life. We get taxed, we get property taxed, and there's no reason why these people should be exempt from it, especially with endowments as large as the ones they get. Some of it subsidized, some of it, I guess, endowments from graduates. But still, their tuition continues to rise unchecked. Tuition at George Washington University undergraduates are charged $42,000 for tuition fees in 2010. That's gone up to $70,000 today. And it continues to rise in universities all over the country. And many of these universities are not subject to tax law, and they should be taxed. Why not? There's several $100 million of lost revenue for the United States.
You're saying you think they should be taxed?
Well, if everybody else is going to be taxed, why do?
Well, then no. But see, that's what I don't. That's the argument I don't like. That's how they get everything. Why not just advocate to get rid of everybody else's taxes?
Well, you can't do that at this point, my friend.
No, but you can lower them. That's the whole problem. Is once you say, okay, these people are all overtaxed, these people need to be taxed too. You're already playing their game. The way that you want to do it, the argument to be made is get rid of the taxation for the other people. They've cut the services in Washington, D.C. that the article said. I'm all for that. We ought not to be advocating raising taxes. We ought to be advocating lessening the taxes of other people.
Indeed, but we should also be advocating for not exempting people for certain reasons from, especially wealthy organizations, from being taxed if everybody else is being taxed. The idea is a slow phase out of taxation until it's completely voluntary.
Sure, but you don't start raising taxes in the meantime. You start phasing out the taxes that are in place. This is similar to the argument that I've heard conservatives make. Everybody has to have skin in the game. So therefore, the individuals who don't pay enough in taxes in order to be in the income tax bracket to pay income tax, they say they need to be paying taxes. I disagree. I think you got to work on cutting taxes of everybody, not raising taxes of other people. If you want to say because they're not paying taxes, they don't get government services, that's something differently. I'm cool with that. But I don't understand why we would ever argue for raising somebody's taxes. Just because they're overtaxing other people doesn't mean that they should then start overtaxing more people.
Well, the problem that we have here with this taxation situation is that they're not cutting spending, and they cannot simultaneously cut taxes and continue to raise spending. It's simply an impossible metric. It's an unsustainable situation that we can't get out of. Well,
James Valiant seems to be on my side, so I think the argument's over.
No, I am for lowering taxes to zero, my friend. That's my
no. But listen to James' logic. I want to hear you retort to James' logic.
If the master whips some slaves less than others, I do not insist that they get whipped as hard as the rest. Yes, I do not either. But you do have a situation here where a wealthy institution with billions upon billions of dollars in endowments that can pay those taxes is somehow immune from them, which you have to admit, James, strikes at the very core of a sense of justice. Now, the fact that we are bearing a tax burden that these wealthy people are not, or the owners of the university are not, in property taxes, that is, seems to be an injustice. Now, the whole tax system itself is unjust. Any compulsory system itself is unjust. We should only be subject to voluntary taxation and not compulsory taxation. But given the dire circumstances of the ballooning debt and the fact that we need revenue, cutting taxes without concurrently cutting spending is a nightmare it's just going to kill us all. It's a nightmare of debt spiral.
Right. So then what we should be advocating is to cut spending.
That is what
but we shouldn't then say, but if you're not going to cut spending, we're going to raise taxes. We should be arguing cut spending, cut taxes, do so in a responsible manner. But what you're saying here is, and what the article's author is saying is, these universities should have their taxes raised because that's fair. Years ago in Power and Market, in some of my objectivists,
under the circumstances, though, with the fact that they're not They're not doing what we would do, which is cut off subsidies, which is lower taxes,
then advocate that,
and concurrently lowering spending.
Then that's what you argue for.
They're doing the opposite. That's what I want. That's what the Capitalist Party wants.
So that's what we argue for.
That's what we are arguing for. But in light of this, I could see the justification of the article's premise, which is there's a whole lot of revenue here that isn't being used.
The premise is wrong, Mark.
I'm not saying the premise is right. I'm saying I could see the argument for the premise, given the fact that there's no will to actually cut spending, and so they're looking for revenue sources wherever they can. That's just the unfortunate pragmatism of living in a system where people are not governing by principle.
Akira Felix says cut foreign aid to socialist Europe. I'm all for that, Akira, but that's not relevant to this. This just has to do with Washington, D.C. This I don't know how exactly they're paid. They might even be federally paid for. I'm not exactly sure, but it has to do with property taxes in Washington, D.C., and these universities aren't paying it. The author of the article thinks that they should be, because they're not doing what he thinks they should be doing as far as education goes. And his premise, the guy's premise, is that taxation is okay, that it's a good thing, that it's just to begin with. My premise is that it's not justified. It's not okay. And the only reason I wouldn't eliminate it all at once is because the consequences would be too catastrophic. But that doesn't mean we start arguing that to level the playing field, we raise taxes. My point is we should just be arguing to cut spending, cut taxes, phase them out as rapidly as possible. To do that, you don't have to raise the taxes.
Now, what we should be arguing about, what we should really be arguing about, since the American Capitalist Party doesn't believe in compulsory taxation, and it doesn't believe that schools should be subsidized by anything, they should be privatized, and doesn't believe in incurring the vast public debt that we've incurred. The real thing we should be doing is attempting to convince the American people that this is a good thing. This is preferable to the course we're on. Not because we're just headed off of a cliff, but why is it moral that people pay a voluntary tax as opposed to compulsory tax? Why is it moral to do away with the social safety net when many people would consider that no other human being on the face of the earth will actually put up a safety net for those who need it, if not for being forced to do so? Now, this should be a subject of our conversation maybe tomorrow, because we're getting up to the hour and we probably can't complete it. But I think that's where I think we can talk practical facts like that all day long. And the practical stuff doesn't seem to necessarily hit home, because when the Republicans were trying to conserve classical liberalism, they talked about the practicality of capitalism. They talked about the impracticality of communism, and they still didn't win the day. Still, the left holds the moral high ground, because the dominant social ethics is altruism and collectivism. And so all they do is highlight that fact and use their arguments, exploit those moral systems to highlight their arguments. So we have to completely introduce a new moral ethics, a new ethical code to the United States of America, and talk about why it's better than altruism and collectivism, why it leads to more happiness, why it leads to more prosperity, and why it is that you don't have to pay taxes to be virtuous. You don't have to subsidize social programs in order to be virtuous. There are other ways in which human beings are virtuous if you're looking at life through the moral perspective of rational egoism and individualism that do not include not being charitable. So you can still be charitable within our ethics.
Absolutely. Was that the capitalist thought for the day?
Sure. It wasn't, but
well, then you got to give the capitalist thought for the day. I thought it was great, but it's got to be official.
Yes. Okay. Look, folks, capitalism is a system of true liberalism. The heart and soul of liberalism is freedom, human autonomy, which means you have total control over your own life and your own resources. Nobody can tell you what to do with them, provided you're not trying to hurt somebody else with them. If you're just pursuing your life and your values, which include the totality of your values, your family, all the things that you hold dear to yourself, then you should be left alone to pursue those things to the best of your ability with the full capacity that you have at your beck and call. And nobody should hinder you from doing that. And capitalism is that system that allows you to be your full moral agent. Nobody from Washington can tell you what to eat. Nobody from Washington can tell you how clean you have to be or how dirty. Nobody from Washington can tell you how much money you should need to spend on your community. Nobody. Only you make those decisions relative to your own particular context and values. And capitalism enables you to do that. And that's my capitalist thought for the day.
Beautifully said.
Thank you, guys. So remember to catch us here, same bat time tomorrow. Hit the like button before you go. We need to keep growing this channel because people need to hear that capitalism is good, individualism is good, rational egoism is good. They need to know why they should live for their own rational self-interest. And you can find that justification, that moral justification right here and nowhere else. So we'll be here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. You can follow me on X if you so choose. We can talk about capitalism if you want, or go to @CapitalistParty, also on Twitter, which is our formal site on Twitter for our party now. Follow Michael Leibowitz, argue with him, help him with the commies, man. We need to defeat the bad guys out there, and the commies are truly the bad guys. And also listen to and watch The Rational Egoist. Until tomorrow, folks, always remember to check your premises. Peace.
Take care.